Hi everyone and welcome to this week's Wallsend history story. This week is Wallsend Tales from the Past number 3. Most of the stories are taken from old newspaper articles, and as said before in the previous videos, they are from various years but not in any particular order. Some of the stories might be slightly longer than others. I hope that you will enjoy it and find it interesting. In December of 1887, a letter appeared in the newspapers from William Boyd. I'm sure many of you will know that in 1901, William Boyd would become the first mayor of the borough of Wallsend, but of course in 1887 the borough did not exist. Mr. Boyd was, however, a member of the Wallsend board and a part of the decision-making team for Wallsend with regard to new buildings, etc., long before he was the mayor. In 1887, he was wanting to make his feelings clear in connection with a proposal for a public garden in Wallsend. The proposed site for this public garden was what we now know as Segedunum Roman Fort. Mr. Boyd had wished to have the garden sorted out in time for the Queen's Jubilee. This, of course, would have been Queen Victoria's Golden Jubilee in June of 1887. However, as he pointed out, talks had begun in March of 1887 but had gone on a lot longer than planned, and in December he found that it had still been put off for yet another month, with the option to now ask the people of Wallsend how they felt about the plans. His letter was by way of, he hoped, persuasion to the people to look on the plans favourably. The land, he stated, was in the ownership of Mr. Frank Buddle Atkinson, and he said he had hoped to buy the land and then gift it to the people of Wallsend on the agreement that the Wallsend board would pay the costs to lay it out, as it was called in those days, as a garden at their expense. He had worked out that this would cost each person who paid rates 2p per year, which he felt was very fair. He went on to say that the plans for the laying out of the gardens had been prepared by Mr. Glover of Newcastle, free of charge, and that Mr. Hollins of the local board would no doubt be happy to show it to anyone who wished to see it. Apart from the idea of a public garden, Mr. Boyd also wished to preserve the remains of the Roman fort and the Roman wall, which he believed were of great historical and local interest. Of course, at this point in time, the remains on shore were a lot less than what we can see today. William Boyd said he would in no way describe this as a park, but he felt it would, once seats were in place, provide some good views up and down the Tyne, and it would be a far superior location to sit and relax than any seats on the high street would be. He also believed that the member of the board who had said the people of Wallsend had no wish for this kind of thing was wrong, as he believed the people of Wallsend would love it. In this instance he would be proved right, but not until 1900, when Richardson Dees Park opened to the public, and that was somewhere that was very popular and very well used by the people of Wallsend, and it still is to this day. I have to admit that one comment that Mr. Boyd made was very similar to those which are often made today, and that was about the amount of new houses being built in Wallsend, which he felt was vast, and the loss of the green spaces, which he also felt was massive. But the town was growing rapidly, people were moving to Wallsend for work in the shipyards and the collieries, and they all needed somewhere to live. It's also probably worth remembering that it is very true to say that for all of us, we live in a house that was once upon a time an open field or even a farm. Sadly for Mr. Boyd, the idea of a public garden on the banks of the Tyne never got off the ground, and the land would later be sold and the houses of Leslie Street and Jones Street, etc., would be built on the site. And when they were demolished in the 70s as part of the slum clearance scheme, which in no way means the homes were slums, it was simply a term used at the time for homes without indoor toilets and bathrooms that were seen as no longer being fit for purpose, The land eventually went back to being a Segedunum Roman fort, and I wonder if William Boyd was looking down and thinking to himself, I am glad to see that the Roman remains have now been preserved for all to be able to see the history of Wallsend. A very strange story appeared in the papers in 1891 concerning a man who had once worked with John Buddle. He was said to go by the name of Anthony Sharp. He claimed that Mr. Buddle often liked to play a little joke on those who wished to visit the mines in Wallsend. Anthony said that many people did not wish to go right to the coalface, but still wished to go a little way down to see what life in a mine was like. He stated that there was a little area where Mr. Buddle would normally take the visitors to, and that above them would often be an element of gas. Mr. Buddle would then expect Anthony to light a rope and throw it into the air, thus causing a small explosion which would usually terrify the visitors and have them rushing back to the surface as fast as their little legs would carry them. How true this story is remains to be seen, as there seems to be no proof other than it being a tale that Mr. Sharp would tell many years later. And it does seem a little unlikely to me, as John Buddle was well known for his safety measures in the collieries, and I somehow can't believe he would create an explosion just to scare the visitors, but I guess we will never know for sure. In June of 1898, Dr. Wilson noted that the town of Wallsend was currently suffering from a severe epidemic of the measles. It seems that this had been an ongoing problem for around 5 weeks. He believed that as the schools of Wallsend were currently closed, it may help to stop the spread. Sadly, during the 5 weeks, 22 people had died. This was the largest death rate for over 2 years, and most of the deaths had been among the elderly. Measles was and still is a serious illness, and of course back in 1898 it was hard to slow the spread when so many people would be living together in cramped conditions, as often small flats and small houses would have 8 or more people living in them. It is no wonder that the infectious diseases hospitals were built to try and help towns like Wallsend to slow the spread of things like measles by taking those who were ill away from those who were healthy. A really short story from 1885 concerns Wallsend Green. It was said that someone who was not named had taken up the grass on the green from one side to the other and created a footpath. The Wallsend board were none too happy about this. It was said that the village green belonged to the public and was not private land where people could do what they liked. It would seem that although a discussion about it took place, the person who did it was not fined. 2 of the board members actually lived on the green, but they had not been the ones to make the path. But this did make me wonder if the paths that we see now were the same ones that were created in 1885. In 1889, swan hunters found themselves in trouble with the Wallsend board. It seems they had erected 2 large gates on the road leading to the entrance of the shipyard, and they had done this without seeking permission. The board stated that this was a public road and the public should therefore be able to access it. Swan hunters were given 48 hours to remove them, and if they were not removed, they would be taken down. A letter was read from swan hunters concerning the gates, and it was stated that they had been put in place as people had mistaken where this road went to in the dark, and they felt it had been dangerous to life. Since they had been in place, they did not feel there had been any public obstruction, but it seems that they would comply with the ruling and the gates would be removed immediately. In 1903, a little article appeared in the papers in connection with the 3rd Mayor of Wallsend, and this was to be Alderman Allen. Now I have to say that I have drawn this picture and it may or may not look like him, as it was taken from a newspaper drawing, and they aren't always a very good likeness in the first place, but hopefully it does give a bit of an idea of what he might have looked like. Born in Newcastle in July of 1830, Mr. Allen had moved to Wallsend in 1855 and had been the manager of the Addison Potter Cement Works at Willington Quay. In 1901, Mr. Allen lived at Orchard House on the Green. He was married to Isabella and the couple had at least 9 children. He was a member of the old Wallsend board, and when Wallsend became a borough in 1901, he became the alderman for the Carville ward. He was said to be a well-travelled man and was described as having seen much of the world, although no details were given as to where he had actually visited. He died in January of 1910 while still living in Orchard House, and left over £4,000 to Grace Annie Allen, who was his daughter. Unfortunately, I have not been able to locate where he is buried, but if I was to guess, I would imagine that he would have been buried in Church Bank Cemetery. I hope that you have enjoyed this third little video of Wallsend stories, and I hope that you have also found it interesting. And I do thank you all very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again very soon.